Hi, I'm Marc Cunningham with Grace Property Management. I want to talk to you for a few minutes about what we're seeing right now in the rental real estate world as it relates to this word inflation that we hear so much about. Are we, as real estate owners, as tenants, are we experiencing inflation? Should we expect it? What is actually happening out there that way? So there's a couple pieces of inflation that are hitting us as real estate investors that are causing us expenses. Yes, inflation does mean potentially the value of our properties going up, and that's good. But boy, inflation also means there's a lot of expenses, and we're seeing those firsthand. So we want you as a real estate owner to prepare next year, especially for increased cost. Things are going to cost more. For example, vendor labor. Vendors are always hard to find. Quality vendors are difficult to find. That's one of the challenges we face as a property management company. But vendor labor rates have been on the increase dramatically in the last couple months. And it's not just in the property management business. It doesn't matter where you go. You have probably experienced what I have personally as well, that there's a shortage of employees when you walk into a fast food restaurant or you walk into a shopping place. They can't find employees because they have to pay more to attract those employees. Well, the same is true as it relates to vendors and what they have to pay their employees, therefore what they have to bill for the jobs they're doing. In the last couple weeks alone, we've received multiple emails from great vendors we've used that we continue to use over periods of time. And they're informing us, and this is very typical of something that we've received. Hey, it's been several years since our last price increase, and unfortunately at this point in time, it is unavoidable. We must be able to continue to provide the same level of service to you, our customers. So beginning next month, our base rate on hourly, this is for a locksmith, is going to have to go up. And so the cost of the locksmith materials going up, the core rate's going from $114 to $128 on a particular type of job. So it's a $14 increase on this particular type of a lock that they rekey. Why? Because they have to pay their people more to get them to show up on the jobs. We're seeing it on the labor cost. We're also seeing it especially as it relates to things like appliances and capital items. Another case in point, another email that came through from one of our vendors who we've used for probably a decade. And they said, it's unfortunate we have to inform you that it is necessary due to increased painting costs, shipping costs, disposal costs, gas prices. We have to increase our prices by approximately 10%. In addition to that, we're expecting the costs that we pay for appliances and for capital improvement things to continue to go up as well. There was an article in today's Wall Street Journal. If you're not a reader, you should probably pick that up. Good information. And almost every day, there seems to be some front page article about inflation, about these types of things. Well, today it was titled this: Kitchen Appliance Delays Force Buyers to Cook Up Alternatives. They're always very witty in their titling there because they're out of appliances. Appliance sellers can't get the appliances they need to sell. And it tells these stories. It tells the story of a woman who's been waiting literally 6 months for her dishwasher to be installed by the appliance sales company. Now, we know in the rental property business, we have to put appliances very often in rental properties, and they are delayed dramatically. Things like appliances are. Capital improvements as well. If we're going in and doing things like a water heater, it's going to be more expensive, unfortunately, and it's going to be delayed. So it's not only costing more, but it's delayed in getting these things done, which is very frustrating. We understand that it's frustrating for the tenants. It's frustrating for you as a property owner. It's certainly frustrating for us as a property management company, but that's part of what is happening with the inflation that we're seeing, with the labor shortage that we're seeing, with the chip shortage, with the port problems. All these things are kind of forming this perfect storm as it relates to these costs. One more example, parts and supplies. Just the other day, my heat in my house didn't kick on. I was testing it for the year and it wouldn't come on. Yes, it even happens to me as a property management person. And so I had to call a plumbing company, an HVAC company. They came out and fortunately they got it going. They didn't have to use any parts. But I asked the gentleman while he was here, I said, hey, so let me ask you, I hear about these problems with parts. Are you guys experiencing that? He said, if it's a plastic part, we almost can't get it right now. Everything's on back order. These plastic parts are all made in China. We can't get them. The prices are high. We're waiting. He said, fortunately for you, I didn't have to do any parts. But yes, the parts are going up. The supplies we use to fix things, whether they're appliances, whether they're HVAC issues, whatever it is, those parts themselves are increasing dramatically. Another example, garage door opening company that we've used for a long time sent us an email and said, hey, the springs that we use in our garage doors, prices on the springs alone have gone up 35%. So therefore, we have to increase. They're not going to eat that. We have to pass that on to you as our consumer. That's going up. And one more, before I get to the good news, one more part of this also means higher turnover costs, which is why it's so important to minimize turnover. When you have a good tenant in place, we want to minimize that turnover, keep good long-term tenants in place for a long period so we avoid this. We avoid turnover costs. Because you know, as a property owner, the biggest expense you will ever incur is this right here. The money you will spend when a tenant moves out and you have to go in and do things like carpet and paint and do some patchwork and some cleaning, that adds up. One more example on the bad news. This came from a paint company, one of the paint companies that we use. We've used them for a long time, great company. They said due to the current paint shortage, I didn't even know there was a shortage, they said the cost for us to obtain our paint has almost doubled. They're paying twice as much for the gallons of paint as they used to pay. Now they said we do expect the supply reduction to cease at some point in time, and hopefully it won't stay doubled for very long. But oh yes, by the way, there will be at least a 15% increase even after the doubling of the price is over. Why? Because our costs are going up so dramatically high. Now, there's also things like this that you know as a property owner, things that are completely out of your control. Things like property insurance. Your property insurance this year, I would suspect, is going to go up. Your property taxes, I can just about guarantee, are going to go up because they're tied to the value of your property. Your value has increased. Your HOA dues are going up. Why? Because HOAs, homeowner associations, they have expenses as well that they have to pay. Their costs have gone up. Therefore, they're going to bill us as the members of the HOA more in our HOA dues to offset their costs. So we have all these expense items that are going up. Now, the good news, but the challenge as well, is the only income item you have as a rental property owner is this, your rent. We talked about a number of expense items right there, a lot of line item expense items. You only have one line item expense, and that's the rent. Now, as you may have found out from some of our prior videos, educational things that we've put out there, the Colorado legislature recently passed a law that said landlords can only increase rent on their tenants one time in any 12-month period. That means you have one time per year where you are allowed as a landlord to increase the rent on your tenant. So you better get that right. Because if you mess that up, you're waiting a whole nother year to potentially get that rent increase in place. We anticipate, as we start heading into the new year here shortly, that all of these increased expenses are going to drive this. It's going to drive rent up dramatically because landlords can't pay all these expenses out of their pockets. The profit margins just aren't there. Landlord profit margins are at an extremely low level compared to historical levels. There's not much profit there. So when all these expenses come in, the rent has to go up to offset the increase in expenses just for the landlord to maintain any type of profit margin. So if you're a client of Grace Property Management, know that this next year we will be working very hard, number one, to keep costs as low as possible. If you as a property owner know of good vendors, please send them our way. We're always looking for great quality vendors to add to our preferred vendor list. Know that as it relates to your rent, we will be analyzing that very closely with our tenants. We never want to lose a good tenant over a rent increase, but we also recognize the fact that you as a property owner do have increased expenses, and we need to ensure that the rent is set at a fair, appropriate price so that you're able to maintain the property, maintain the things that you're required to with the tenant. If you have questions, please consider us a resource here at Grace Property Management. Reach out to us at rentgrace.com is our web address. We're happy to provide any information and help in any way we can.